Our former Australian under-21 rugby rep and an ex-Australian schoolboys coach, Michael Broad, is our guest today on Absolutely Famous. And of course, we're talking about the, sensational decision recently to sack Wallabies coach Dave Rennie and replace him with recently sacked England coach Eddie Jones. And Michael, what are your thoughts on that? It sort of blindsided me a bit.
Yes, John, I think it caught everyone by surprise. Although I must admit, when I saw the coaching staff, Matt Taylor, the defence coach, left a few months ago, and then more recently Scott Wisemantle left, I got a sense that maybe there was something up, and certainly, I wasn't surprised when it happened, but I really questioned the timing and questioned the way in which someone of Dave Rennie's standing was treated like that. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. I now know in professional rugby, but it still doesn't look great.
No, that's right. Well, I guess Australian Rugby Chairman Hamish McLennan, he's got a reputation for sort of firing a little bit from the hip in some areas, publicly anyway, about competitions and about what he wants and what he doesn't want. And I guess with this decision, his reputation very much on the line. It could be a stroke of genius or an absolute disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be sink or swim, won't it?
Yeah. And I guess the bottom line is, Michael, realistically, with Dave Rennie's teams only winning 38% of their games, that's not good enough for a top-tier rugby nation.
Yes, I don't think you're going to win the World Cup on those numbers. But certainly, it's interesting, you see the commentary in Australia about the whole transition. And the one thing that keeps coming about is with Eddie Jones's appointment, rugby is certainly on the front page everywhere where rugby's played in Australia. Everyone's talking about it, and that is a good thing in one way. Certainly, I'm sure Eddie Jones, I think he's a very shrewd individual, a very, very good coach, and I think he would have calculated this possibility some time ago. I don't think it would have just happened overnight. I think he's a smart man, and I think he would have realised that there was some sort of shaky ground that Dave Rennie was on, and that this is not something that I believe would have happened overnight.
No, I get the feeling Hamish McLennan has been waiting just to see where Eddie Jones would end up before looks like something out of a spy novel, reading between the lines. And
yeah, exactly.
Poor old Dave Rennie was in the dark, I think.
Yeah, totally. I remember I was down at Sanctuary Cove near the Gold Coast just on a holiday, and the whole Wallabies coaching staff and management were down there for a week, and they were just planning the whole World Cup year. And so then only 3 weeks ago, the whole Wallabies squad were up here in Brisbane training and being prepared and being given all the information about where they were going to stay and the type of conditions that they would be under. So, all of that, I gather, has gone out the window. I just don't know where they start from.
I suppose on a positive note, the selected 40-odd players in the squad be a little bit nervous about their positions now, and maybe might fire up the Super Rugby teams to play a bit better this season.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true, John. I think wherever Eddie Jones has gone, there's always been that honeymoon period, and he certainly sparks people into life. And, the one thing about Eddie Jones, John, is that he's a real rugby man. And, you hear this information about he wants to go back and get those rugby players that are now playing in the NRL. And so he is a rugby man. And I think he's being an Australian. It's great to have an Australian coaching the national team, although I don't think it's that necessary. But certainly I think it's created a wave of interest, and certainly rugby is certainly to the foremost of most people's talking at the moment.
Of course, Eddie's got a great record at World Cups. He helped the Springboks. He was an assistant coach when they won the World Cup.
Correct.
He took Japan to those great heights where they beat the Springboks. And of course, he took England to the World Cup final. So he knows exactly what's required.
Oh, yes. Eddie Jones has a work ethic second to none, John. He will work 24 hours a day if it's necessary, 7 days a week in preparation for this World Cup. He won't leave any stone unturned. However, he demands that from his management as well and his players. So they will all be on the same page. You can certainly take that for granted, that no player or no member of the management will be just sitting back and waiting for the World Cup to come. They will be working very, very hard over the next 9 months.
Of course, Eddie inherits this team in particular, probably right at the perfect moment, because Dave Rennie, partly out of necessity through injuries, has introduced a lot of young players to the side, and they came very close on, about 5 occasions. They could have easily won games they lost.
Sure, and that's a real positive for Eddie Jones going forward. I think that, very close to beating the All Blacks, very close to beating France, very close to beating Ireland. So there's opportunity there for him to tinker with what's been going on, and I hope and I imagine he'd be smart enough to keep Dan McKellar on his team management, because Dan would be able to give him a very clear understanding of the players that they've used, the players that they feel were heading towards the World Cup, and maybe those that weren't. And so I do think he will bring an energy and a newfound focus over the next 9 months, which is, when you think about it, he's got nothing to lose coming in with 9 months to go.
No, exactly. You mentioned before, you alluded to the fact that he's Australian, coaching an Australian team. I've always shaken my head and wondered why Australia has to have New Zealand coaches. I'm a Kiwi myself. I know how good the Kiwi coaches are, but to me, if I was playing for a country, I'd want someone from my country. The parochial part of it, which is a small part of switching your brain on and making you play that much better, can only come from one of your own, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think everyone's very happy about that. Although, no negativity towards Dave Rennie. I mean, he was given the job, and I think he did the best he could in the time that he had available. But certainly, I think the general consensus is just like yours, John, that to have an Australian coaching the Wallabies or an Australian coaching an Australian national team is the best fit.
So do you think Jones will make many changes to the squad? It's hard to tell. Yeah.
Look, I don't know, John. They've used so many players over the last 2.5 years. Some, as you said, due to injury. Some due to the fact that they went overseas to France or Japan. Yeah, I'm a bit lost for words as to what he will do, but I'm sure he has an opinion. I'm sure he's done his homework, even to this point. Only a week gone from his appointment. I'm sure he's been on the phone, and I'm sure he's gathering as much information about every player, their strengths, their weaknesses, and whether they're a good fit for the Wallabies.
Yeah, if there was any criticism of Dave Rennie, it was a bit like Ian Foster with the All Blacks, although I rate Dave a much better coach than Fozzie, but very inconsistent selections, especially in halfback, first five, fullback, loose forward. I wasn't sure what he was trying to achieve there. I don't know.
Yeah. I think you're very correct, John. There was an article written probably the end of last year, and it just showed in number form the number of players that had played in those positions throughout Dave Rennie's tenure. And it was just extraordinary that there were very few positions that had some consistency in terms of the same people playing there day in, day out. And I don't know what that does for the consistency of their team performance, but also the consistency in terms of the players' mindset being either positive or negative based on one day being in the team and one day being out of the team.
Yeah, it's confusing. No doubt he knew what he was doing, but I'm sure Eddie will sort that out. And whatever team he comes up with, Australia, to me, are one of about 5 teams who could quite easily win the World Cup in France this year. And I'm lucky enough to be going over there. And friends of mine who live there, Kiwis, have told me there's a lot of excitement mounting in France.
Oh, I would think so. I think this is probably the first time the Northern Hemisphere sides have had a number of teams that will go very close to challenging for the World Cup. I think Ireland, France, obviously. I think England under an English coach will, again, like Australia, I think they'll be revitalised. I think the All Blacks will always be dangerous, no matter where they play and what competition they play. And then you've got some smokies. Argentina are constantly on the improve. I think Michael Cheika has found his niche there with that team, and I think he will have them very well prepared as well. So I think it's going to be an exciting World Cup in terms of the fact that there are a lot of teams that will give themselves every chance to win that tournament.
Yeah, quite agree. I'm looking forward to it. I think I'll be at that first game, France versus the All Blacks in Paris, and I think there's about 80-odd thousand crazy Frenchmen, a few thousand Kiwis like us there. It'd be fantastic.
Well, I was at the quarterfinal in 2007 at the Millennium Stadium, and I think everyone remembers that game. And if that's the first game of the tournament, that will be a cracker.
It sure will be. And of course, Michael, your company, Next Gen Rugby Coaching, what are you up to at present, and what are your plans for the coming season?
Yeah, John, we have a really busy, if I use a school analogy, term 1 to Easter holidays. We've got a number of contracts with some clubs. We have just like a junior skills academy with Brothers Rugby Club here in Brisbane. We're also doing a tackle clinic and a confidence in contact clinic for them. We also do some grading for them. And then we're working with St Peter's Rugby, which is a smaller rugby school here in Brisbane. And then I've got 3 Sundays up in Toowoomba doing our confidence in contact program up there for a number of schools and clubs. And then we're running our pre-season clinic over 2 Sundays. So, there's plenty of work going on. And, I'm very lucky to have some wonderful coaching staff who I can give the leadership reins to, because now that we're getting more and more contracts at the same time, I can't be in the same place at the same time. So I'm very fortunate to have some wonderful senior rugby coaches to be able to run those programs for me.
Good stuff. You're doing a great job there, Michael, helping develop the young talent in Australia. And one thing about Eddie Jones, as you said before, whatever happens, rugby will be very much more on the front page than it was previously.
Yes, and I think he will take a great imprint on the whole of rugby in Australia. I don't think he will concern himself completely with the Wallabies. I think he'll be very much about, what are we doing at the grassroots level? Where are we falling down? Are we allowing too much influence from the rugby league clubs at our schools? And I think he will bring back a much more rugby union focus to what's important about the development of rugby in Australia. I really hope that's the case.
And it's wonderful too to see he's overseeing the women's program too, because I think the Aussie women's team, with a bit more professionalism and a bit more experience, can be right up there with the best as well.
Oh, certainly. And I think they're excited about having his footprint on their program as well. And I think that's an exceptional decision. But I also hope that he takes a look at, what's happening at the grassroots level, what's happening at our Super Rugby levels, because I think to be successful like New Zealand have been so successful, I think the one thing that the 2 things that they do all their rugby is connected, their clubs are connected to their super clubs, and then there's collaboration between all the supers clubs in New Zealand. Whereas I don't think that happens in Australia as much. And I think that's a real downfall in our system. But certainly I'm hoping that Ed Jones can revitalise that concept of collaboration so that we're all travelling on the same line.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Michael, thanks a lot for your expertise. Always love talking footy with you, and all the best for the coming season.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate it, and really glad to see that Absolutely Famous is going so well.
Yeah, cheers, Michael.
Thank you.